1 Kings chapter 16, beginning in verse 30, it says this: Ahab, son of Imri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethabal, king of the Sodomites, and began to serve Baal and worship him. He chose not only to not follow after God, but he chose to marry someone who did not follow after God. And marriage is definitely a major decision. And he did not consider the fact that if he marries an ungodly woman who worships other gods, it's going to have an effect on Israel. He became a follower of his culture. He started to follow Jezebel, and as a result, Jezebel would kill many ministers and prophets of God. So she wanted to eliminate people who wanted to serve the God of the Israelites, and she wanted them to all to worship Baal so that she could have control over them. But Elijah rebukes King Ahab. By rebuking King Ahab, he was making a major decision, because he was putting his life on the line. To rebuke the king in such a way, King Ahab could come after him and try to kill him. But instead of trying to kill him, we see that Ahab was led into a difficult situation. In 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1, it says this: Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my order. Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. And when he saw Elijah, he said to him, Is that you troubler of Israel? Have you not made trouble for Israel? Elijah replied, But you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. So notice what takes place. King Ahab does not acknowledge the fact that he has sinned. He does not acknowledge the fact that God is judging him for his wrong actions. Rather, Ahab blames the famine and the drought on Elijah. It's Elijah's fault it's not raining. And this reminds me of how a lot of people make major decisions based off of selfish interests. And then when everything goes wrong and when everything goes bad, they say, it's not my fault, it's your fault that happened. Yeah, but you made the major decision to do this. You're the one who decided to start worshiping something other than God. But the thing is sin makes people blind. And as a result, people do not acknowledge their mistakes. But instead of acknowledging their mistakes, they start making even worse mistakes. In 1 Kings 18, beginning verse 19, Elijah says this: Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet on Mount Carmel, and bring 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent word throughout all of Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. But the people said nothing. This is an example of someone who wants to worship God on Sundays, but also wants to worship wealth, popularity, fame, beauty, wants to follow after the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, the lust of the eye. They want to pursue this and worship this 6 days out of the week, but they say, well, I'll devote one day of my week to worshiping God for a few hours on Sunday. This is someone who wavers between two opinions. James would refer to this as someone who is double-minded, who is religious but also unreligious in the fact that they follow after the lusts of this world. God despises this. And that is why in Revelations 3:16 it says this: so because you are lukewarm or double-minded, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. This idea of spitting you out of my mouth is talking about judgment. God is about to inflict judgment on you because you're trying to worship this created things and also worship me. You're trying to pursue the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life, and you're also using that same mouth to sing praise to me. That is someone who is lukewarm and double-minded. And God says that he's going to judge those who have that indecisive attitude. This is a picture to example what a indecisive attitude, the result of an indecisive attitude. An indecisive attitude ends in death. It does not end in life. The bunny does not stop in the middle of the road. It goes across the road as fast as it can. The deer, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes they do. But most deer run all the way across the road. They don't just stand in the middle of the road. Although armadillos, they're called a hillbilly road bump. And they're called that because they have this idea that if they just curl up in their shell in the middle of the road, they'll be safe. In a similar way, some people are comfortable in this place of indecisiveness, not realizing that they're right in the middle of the road, ready to get run over. Jesus also talks about this indecisiveness and how it leads to death in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7, verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evil doers. Jesus is saying this about people who pretend to follow after God on Sunday, but choose to live a life of sin throughout the week. This is talking about someone who prophesies and teaches about God, but lives an unrighteous life. This is talking about someone who is lukewarm, someone who is double-minded and indecisive, and how this indecisiveness on whether I'm going to follow God or whether I'm going to follow the world ends in death. I heard a friend of mine once say, one of the most miserable ways, most miserable and hardest ways to get to hell is to live a lukewarm life. You're making this sacrifice, you're making this time, you're trying to worship God, and on Sundays or a couple times when you're around other Christians. But the rest of your life, you're living a life of sin and you're mocking God. This indecisiveness ends in death and is one of the most hardest and miserable ways to go to hell. But the truth is, God has given us His Word in order to encourage us to fully submit our lives, our hearts, in to God. Because Jesus goes on to say this, is the narrow way leads to life. And those who pursue that will have eternal life. And God will say to them, you're my child. But look at this, continue looking at the story of Elijah. And how he challenges the powers of Baal and the faith of the people who are believing, who are worshiping this Baal and also trying to worship God alongside. And in 1 Kings 18, 22 through 23, it says this. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it into the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. In this, Elijah is putting the faith of those who follow after Baal to the test. The thing is this god of Baal that they created was considered to be a sun god and the god of fire. So Elijah is saying, this god of fire that you have been worshiping, surely he can prove himself by sending fire down and burning this altar. If you say he is the God of fire, let him prove himself by sending fire down on this altar. I want you to prepare this. I want you to prepare this altar, and then let us find out who the one true God is. But also notice the numbers. Elijah, there was 1. The prophets of Baal was 450 prophets, along with all these lukewarm Israelites. It does not give us a number of the number of Israelites who came to watch. But we can see that there was a minority and there was a majority. And the minority was the one prophet, Elijah, who said, you know what, I'm not going to follow after the culture. I'm not going to follow after popular demand. I'm not going to follow after the crowd. I'm going to choose to stand up after God, even if I'm the only one. That is the type of faith that God rewards. That is the type of faith that God desires. God desires people to have so much faith in Him that despite the minority, despite the majority, we would proclaim Jesus Christ, and we would live a life that faithfully declares our faith in God despite who stands with us and who stands against us. Verse 24. Then you call on the name of your God, Baal, and I will call on the name of my Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God. Then all the people said, what you say is good. They said, well surely if Baal is the God of fire, he can prove himself. This will be easy. Let's find out. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull and given to them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. Notice how long they were shouting and dancing in order to get the attention of Baal. But notice the response. There was no answer. And the truth is, this should remind us that when we seek after the things of this world in order to find fulfillment, protection, and pleasure, it ends with death. It does not benefit us, but it leaves us with no answer when it comes to the true meaning of life. But let's find out if we can find meaning through worshiping the one true God. Elijah had such faith in God, he started mocking the prophets of Baal and Asherah. He said, maybe your God is, maybe Baal is in the bathroom. Or maybe he's gone on a vacation. Or maybe he's asleep. Maybe you should shout even louder and wake him up. And as a result, these prophets of Baal got even angrier, and they shouted even louder, and they started cutting themselves in order to inflict pain, in order to hopefully get the attention of Baal. But we see no change. They wear themselves out with no answer from Baal. But Elijah, he decides to do something different. He decides to get these prophets of Baal and get them to get jugs of water and start dumping on this pit and digging a trench around the pit in order to cover it with water. And they do it once. And he says, do it again. And they do it a second time, and then a third time, and a fourth time. But he does not do this because of a lack of faith. He does this in order to prove his confidence so that there's not a shadow of a doubt that when this sets on fire, that is an act of God in order to bring him glory. Notice how Elijah's major decision is focused on giving God his faith in order to bring God the greatest glory. He asks himself, what can I do in order to bring God the greatest glory? All right, let's do one bucket of water. Let's do 4 rounds of dumping water on there, because this will give God even more glory. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord. Answer me, so that these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood and the stones and the soil, and also lift up the water in the trench. So in this, we see who the one true God is. We see who actually can answer prayers. But not only does he burn up the sacrifice, notice that God's power and God's glory is so powerful and glorious that it also burned up the wood, the stones, and the soil, and left not even a drip of water. We see that God's power is all-consuming, and he is worthy of worship and worthy of praise. In verse 39, when all the people saw this, they fell down prostrate and cried, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. They humbled themselves before an all-powerful, all-consuming God. They realized who the one true God is. first question of application. Before making my next major decision, is there sin in my life that I need to address? Is there sin in my life that I need to repent of? Is there a path of sinful desire that I'm following on that I need to acknowledge and turn from? So that I don't continue to make worse and worse decisions in life. Second, do I allow the majority to affect my decisions, or do I let God affect them? Am I following after a crowd? Am I doing what other people are doing? Or am I focusing on doing what Jesus wants me to do? Am I focused on following Christ, or am I focused on following culture? Third, how will I focus on my commitment to God in faith before making my next decision?